Good, you didn't see all the changes. All the weird changes. There we go.
Oh, now you're live.
I'm live. That explained why I didn't see any viewers. And why the viewers were grey.
I don't see any viewers either as I'm watching.
You're a viewer? Question mark.
Wait, what?
You're a viewer? Question mark.
Why is it giving me... I see, it says offline, but it says you're live.
That's weird. Let me check what happens when I go to Twitch. Actually, Twitch my phone? I think Twitch on my phone should tell me. Profile. It says I'm live with one viewer.
It says offline for me. Maybe I need to reload it. See, Naruto Sonic 2 made a... Oh, now it's live. Okay, I have to
Naruto
reload
Sonic
it
made
again.
the comment. He says hello. Well, they say hello.
Okay, hello, 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 hello.
What am I moving? I don't know what I'm moving. Oh, I'm moving this image. What is this image? Oh. Right. Okay, so we're live with Naruto Sonic as the one viewer. The one viewer. Oh, I have a question.
Woo!
Your new
Sure.
PFP. What is it? Is it a spoiler?
It's canon. It's canon.
What is it? Spoiler.
Technically, it's a spoiler, yeah. It's technically a spoiler, and it's technically art that I commissioned for a thing. I'm pretty sure I've shown you the design of the character before, too. I just haven't... I'm not sure if I've shown you that art specifically.
Oh, is for that
I can
thing.
show you the art.
I thought it was for between.
If it's... No, it's not for between.
I mean, I see.
Oh, I don't think I'm hearing you in the stream.
Oh, am I muted? I'm not muted.
Yeah, I'm hearing you talk in Discord, but I'm not hearing the echo in the stream like I am for myself. I think this happened last time, too.
Let's see.
Muchas cosas. Soba, me añade, mi nombre es Miquelino. Soba, me añade, mi nombre es Miquelino.
Yay, echo.
What the?
Soba, me añade, mi nombre es Miquelino.
Oh my goodness, I keep hearing this. Is that Spanish? Are you listening to something else? Is that Spanish?
Oh, I cannot hear myself in the stream either. Interesting. No, you're not muted. So Naruto
Okay, I
can
hear you.
hear me.
I mean, I hear you now, so you're not muted
Okay.
anymore at the very least.
And yes, I was watching Twitch, and the first thing that Twitch showed me was like the Spanish Twitch streamer.
Ah, okay. So for me, it was like I just heard. It heard it sounded like Spanish. I didn't understand what it said because I don't speak Spanish. I heard a, sorry. It was like, oh, na 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 na, and then just like a high pitch, and then it just went away.
Right. I don't know why why the high pitch. We can watch Iron Man though.
Okay. Is that just gonna be the stream? We just watch another streamer.
I think the funny thing is you're not allowed to watch other streamers, but you're allowed to watch YouTube videos.
Well, that's up to the YouTuber in question who made the thing, I imagine. Technically.
There are a lot of reactionary channels.
Either way, probably in a good place to start, right?
I mean, where we started, but yes.
Start with the actual game stuff properly. So, hello. So this is, and I think we've played earlier versions of it before. Sword and Soul. I'm half thinking I might have said Soul and Sword on on the thing on my Discord to say that I was going to play it.
So and so.
But it's Sword and Soul. It's an RPG Maker TFG game on TFGS by Ultramentia, who I had to look that up briefly because I remember the Ultra part, the ALTRA part. Sorry, actually it's Atramentia. Damn it. Okay, I'm doing really well at the start of this.
Yay.
Either way, so I haven't played this since a concept version, so there's actually a note in here for patch notes. So this first test release, I'm pretty sure this is what I played. And we are now on 0.4a, and from what little I've heard from people talking about it, it sounds like it is updated a lot since then. So I figured that I'd go through it and, play it. Find an excuse to play it via this stream, right?
Yep. And it is marked as X, so I'm ready with the trigger.
We'll see if there's like any sort of build up or warning. The first note I'll make is that I opened this up and the music stopped after a time. So if Atramentia sees this at all, then I will I will say that's a note. That's a note on it.
Are they on your server?
No. I just I played the original concept version, and I'm in the credits for this act. Because me and like a couple other people dug into the original concept version, gave feedback. There's like a thread on TFGS about that. And I remember my impression of it was like, this is the sort of game I'd make. And I really was excited about it potentially like building up and becoming bigger because of that. Because it's like, yeah, I want to see more people play the sort of thing like I would want to make personally.
How would you define a game you are making?
I don't know. But it's just sort of like the feel of going through it. It's like, yeah, this is the sort of thing, like if I was doing this concept, these are the sort of decisions and way I'd present it that feel like a similar sort of like, I guess, narrative voice. It felt similar to what I feel like I try to do. I'm not sure how to describe that outside of like that really abstract way.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So I've been big on trying to support this, like noting that new versions come out and whatnot. I haven't played it since that first concept version because I like to let things develop and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I wish Atramentia's name was a couple less syllables to make it easier to remember. But beyond that, the only criticism so far, this looks like it's probably AI, which is you're not trying to make. My general thought process on AI stuff is you're not trying to make money off of it. I'm generally okay with it. If you start trying to make like money off of it, you need to be like completely committed to replacing it at minimum, or avoid it. That's generally where my status is on that. And then there's the music thing. It seemed to be like actually leveled well. It didn't blow out your ears, anything like that you typically have in an RPG Maker game. And the music started. It was decent, but also it ended because apparently it's not looped properly. And I know some music just does that, even when they're like in OGG format properly.
But do you think
I know we have that in Oathbreaker. But it's like a 3-minute song, and I think this was less.
Do you think it's an issue with RPG Maker itself or with the audio file?
The lack of
the lack of loop, yeah.
Looping. I think typically, if you run into that, it has to do more with the audio file. But I think it always has to do with the audio file. There's a chance that Atra didn't do just didn't use the looping file in the first place. And I know there's some stuff that you take and you try to put in a looping format, but it doesn't loop properly because the metadata isn't in there for it to loop. So it just is like it isn't looping in the first place.
Right. Returning to the topic
So
of
I think
AI, what do you think about concept using it as like a base? Because I feel like this building in the middle is really creative. Like
I
the,
think incredibly impractical too.
I mean, yeah, but on the very least looks fantastical. And then you can say like, oh, it's to reflect the light of the sun because it's like a sun temple or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with using it for like ideas and whatnots. I think my issue is and always will basically boil down to with AI being you're taking other people's work, putting it through a software, and then if you're trying to make money off of that, then I'm not a fan of that. Where what you're talking about, where it's like ideas, that's very much well, that's like actually the same thing as like what just humans do normally. They see other things and they take inspiration.
Right.
Now, if you're also just like making AI and then just straight up tracing it one for one, maybe beyond the that's much more of a gray area, I imagine. But
Uh, then second question, how much do you remember of the game?
it's been a while. It's been a while, and I remember starting at the game. I remember going through a ship, off the ship, off of that, going around an area, going into like a temple area, coming out of it basically with the TF situation, and then getting back on the ship. All the sort of stuff where like everyone was like dealing with the TF changes, and then I remember them getting off of that. There's a comedic sequence that went to a. I remember just like it was going on and on. It wasn't even a release game at the time, and it was just like this just keeps going. Like not in a bad way, but more like this is like in the concept form for TFGS. It's not even like a released first release, and it's like wow, okay, this is way more than I'd ever expect for someone that like didn't feel like it was ready for that first release.
Wait, I think I also played it.
Yeah, I remember like trying to get you to play it at the time, and your computer was just slowing down constantly. Do you
Oh.
remember that one where like the FPS, or maybe it was the stream FPS, where it was
No,
like,
it was my
or oh, there was a delay. It was a delay, I think.
right, there was like a whole minute or 2 minute delay.
Yeah, something like that. Something like that.
Yeah, the computer they lent me was a really potato.
Is that when you were when your computer was down and
Yep,
you got a loaner?
I got an up, and then I got an upgrade. This is almost a PC.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I think that's probably at least we can continue talking if you have any more thoughts.
Yep,
As I
yep.
press new game, because I've been sitting without even that since. Play the game from the very beginning. Chapter skip using an input code. Interesting. I've got chapter skip in between, so I like that idea, especially in this sort of TFGS game situation where I always prefer to allow someone to like keep their saves, but at the same time that does a lot to make it easier to jump back in if you lose your saves or you just want to look at different ways things can play out, that sort of thing.
Right. I don't remember the first couple of hours having any adult content, but things might have changed.
I mean, on my very vague of what I feel like I've heard about the game, since that first concept release, it sounds like it's changed significantly. In terms of things getting restructured, refined, because the original version was like it was good, and I felt like this is the sort of way I do stuff, but you could feel that sort of like this is the first time they're doing it, and like you could see the potential, but you could see that it wasn't quite meeting that potential at the same time at that point.
Right, right. Small question. Can you hear this? I finished.
I'm not hearing anything.
Got it. It's because I can see the lines in the mic audio saying they are perceiving something. So I always wondered,
Probably pretty quiet if it is, at the very least.
then it's a pretty good mic then. To be able to perceive this.
Well, this seems entirely new.
When did things started? Like at the boat or slightly before?
Is it loud? Yeah, is it
not for me.
loud?
Is it for you?
I don't know. It's hard to tell when the music is on my side and I'm also technically have the stream open at a low volume. I can't hear myself as clearly anymore, at the very least in the stream.
Got
I
it.
can't hear the echo.
Well, I can hear the Persona soundtrack.
Ooh, actually, yeah, that's a good point. Because I recognize this song. This is... Oh, I'm trying to remember precisely. This is either like from one of the remix licensed track packs, or it's just one of the normal RPG Maker MZ ones. Because I remember there's a couple that were quite Persona inspired. I guess confiscated artifacts. I feel like one or both of those words are misspelled.
I'm almost sure it's just a Persona 5 soundtrack. Like straight up.
Oh, no. So RPG Maker MZ, you can sort of hear it as you go through the soundtrack that they have in MZ, as well as some of the other packs that they've released after. You can sort of sound that it's like incredibly supposed to feel inspired by some popular JRPGs of the time, like Persona. I felt there's others in the set that feel like they're inspired by like Trails and other stuff like that. Some by like Xenoblade. So you can sort of like hear like, oh yeah, they're definitely trying to emulate that style, and this is definitely one of them. Also, Regnegar. That is a long name. I'm gonna call him Reggie.
Reggie.
Oh, okay. I assume this is the Vicious Stella tutorial stuff, which I've wanted to try making use of.
Is it a new thing? I don't remember the plugin.
Yeah, this is pretty standard. Artifact. Okay, spelling that differently in here too. I think I feel like the chapter title use ARTI. Interesting. This is like a class change. Or just, oh, okay. Menus within. Oh, okay.
I think I kind of remember this part.
I don't remember this. I don't remember I also don't remember a way in RPG Maker to allow you to do sort of like menus within menus in this.
Oh, there is an option. Nested menus, I think.
Is there? Okay, I'm not aware of it.
I'm 90% sure this is Persona track.
It's not actually a Persona track. I could probably go track down specifically which one it is.
I literally downloaded the thing, and I will look into the files while you play.
Oh, I recognize it. It's not a Persona track. Like, I recognize it from RPG Maker.
Oh, you might be right.
So the one thing I'll note is tutorials are good, and this is probably better than it could be. Putting everything in text boxes one after the other it's not bad, and it's better presented. It's a lot better presented than it can be in, honestly, I tend to do at this point. And that's definitely something that whenever I redo what it is, whenever I like redo what the actual whenever I go through my game again and I sort of refresh all that stuff, it's definitely something I want to do better. But there's also the fact that tutorials, you definitely want to teach. Have you seen the question mark boxes underneath the enemy? No, because I've only had 2 enemies. There are undiscovered elemental weaknesses. Here, a quick glance at information. I see the appropriate element against your foes. The box will change to reflect what enemy is weak against. Why not try some of the artifacts of elements to see what you can reveal? Interesting. There's too much, I'd say. I'm interested to see. I'm assuming a lot of this is going to basically go away at a point.
The default graphics?
Not the default graphics, but like a lot of these abilities, basically.
Oh. Got it.
I'm inclined to sorry, no, so that's one of the things where there's just so many abilities that it's more, and I'm trying to think through precisely the implications of it.
That we're not gonna be this character for long.
Yeah, I assume so, basically, because typically if you're building this sort of game, you're not gonna...
Oh, you secret break. Talk to the guards, you know you want to.
Did he... Not this way. Rah. No, I don't want to... Ah! Now I actually have to fight him. I assume because these are all enemies versus this, which are... that wasn't better. Oh, it's an interesting dynamic, I guess, probably be the way to phrase it. There are like a dozen abilities, and that's probably more like the number of abilities you want to give like closer to endgame. So this very well could be a part of the game that's supposed to be like, well, this is more like what your game's going to be near endgame. Magic, the one thing that cannot easily be shared or traded. The practice of sharing magic is done through the creation of artifacts, items that can replace the need of a person holding magical power. Also, hello, Leaf Ian Anderson. I see your comments. The Holy Order exists solely to stop the misuse of magic and artifacts that would be threat that would threaten the world of Asterin. They achieved this with magic and specialist training of their own. For hundreds of years, they kept the world safe until now. The theft of artifacts from all over Asterin marks the beginning of a journey that will change your life forever, and for you to have been called upon to stop this foe. Okay. This feels familiar. I feel like I remember this section.
Okay, they're different. Do you want me to play the music that I thought it was? I'm pretty sure it's this one.
Sure. Oh, that's like the mini boss theme.
Yes.
think? Okay.
This
Yeah.
one or
Man,
this-
it's been a long time. It's been a long time since I played Persona 5, and I remember that.
Either this one or this one.
I don't hear that one clear. My music's probably a bit high, and I could probably lower it at a point on my side. I don't hear it clearly.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Quit.
Yeah, I don't even know what name I want to do. Let's go with Qui.
Qui. Qui? Qui.
Because I wanted to do Q, and that felt a bit too jokey.
Q. You could put Q in the honor of one of my characters. I don't know what the hell.
Did you have it? Did you have Q as one of the Rebirth of Eden? What was the Rebirth of Eden character? I think they had one.
The main character was Eve, and the succubus was Q. Just a Q.
Okay. When I think Q, I think of the Star Trek character, and I didn't really even watch Star Trek.
But Star Trek is CUE probably, right? Or just Q?
I thought it was just the letter Q.
Unsure.
I feel like I had this criticism when I played it originally,
Yep.
but there are a lot of proper nouns and names being presented in this.
Was it the thing
That
that
is
you said or I said?
What for when you played it? Because I don't
Yeah.
remember what you said when you played it.
I might have.
I'm
the
just
same
remembering
criticism,
You have the same criticism?
probably, because I remember. One day I was like, "Oh, I remember we were trying to play this game. Let me play this properly," and then I actually played the 0.3 version, or whatever was publicly available at the time. And I was like, this is a lot of proper names. Generally not a fan of proper names. Especially when you can substitute it for something more normal. Like commonly used.
So in my thought process is like I would probably structure the dialogue so they're speaking more generally.
Right.
Like when you say, hey, former royal guard, your kingdom commander, those aren't things you have to explain. When you're talking about a bunch of these different locations or just like lore item names and stuff like that, what you typically end up wanting to do is you want to, instead of being like, okay, let's dump this exposition, what you end up wanting to do is you want to bring up those things when they're relevant. So we're going to go on like an adventure to basically chase after this guy who stole one of the artifacts, right? You typically would want to introduce like each of these individual concepts like as they're relevant throughout that process, basically, as a way to sort of slowly introduce them.
Right.
And then you'd also want to like repeat them a few times after that too, when also relevant, as a way to once again sort of just like instill that knowledge. The risk that you have by throwing a bunch of stuff, mouthful of a name, mouthful of attitude. Yeah, okay. No, I agree. I agree on that one. The risk you have when you throw another name at this is that what is important for you to know gets sort of lost in the mix of a bunch of stuff that you're not really, properly capturing, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's retention. It's like a teaching exercise, basically, because so much of like presenting information, presenting lore, presenting world building, presenting character, um, there's a lot of that basically boils down to it's like trying to teach someone something. It's like being a teacher in a classroom and trying to get people to retain information in order to set that foundation up in order for the stuff that you want to do otherwise to pay off, basically. Because I'm gonna guess that probably a good 50% of the stuff that was in there that was like proper nouns and names and whatnot probably don't matter, and or at the very least won't matter for like another 20-30 hours.
The Dark Souls school of teaching.
But there
proper
are
names.
things like that. Yeah, there are things like the Gate of Alexandria there, which I think it was a good job to mention that multiple times, especially put the exclamation point or the period on the scene by basically mentioning again. That's a good idea. If that's the important thing to take away from it, it was good to put it there to reinforce that as an important thing to remember. But all the other stuff, I feel like there's so much there with the intent to be like, oh, this world has so much going on. But it also, like I said, sort of makes it a little messy.
Right. If you want to give that impression of, oh, there's a lot of things going on, you could put a library with things that are currently going, or just have like NPCs talk about a lot of things that are currently ongoing. The full body looks funny because it's an AI body, so it's like pretty detailed and whatever, with the MC head, so it looks like a baby face.
I feel like the MC head is just supposed to look a bit more effeminate.
Right.
So, yeah, it doesn't perfectly match, but like for like taking an AI thing and putting it on like a character generator thing, that I actually think like it's a pretty good job. I am so much in that realm of creator where it's like, give me my limitations and I'll try to make it work, or I'll adjust how I approach it within those limitations. So I can respect the hell out of like trying to make that work, especially when it's not just like going and doing an AI art and just using that. You're actually still using the like character generator, and you're just sort of adding on to it, which I like that as like a sort of creative solution that doesn't just rely on AI but sort of uses it as supplementary. Obviously, long term, my preference would be to like have custom art, just period. That's not going to be the option for 99% of games, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to judge it that hard on that.
I'm actually kind of growing used to AI art. There is some AI art that's really good, and then there's some AI art that looks generic.
It just looks so similar
To each other, right?
It's because it's all like it feels like the same art style. There's some element to it. Like I wouldn't look at this and think AI because I do think that it's blended together pretty well. Uh, it's obviously a bit different in terms of like I'd say the face style relative to the rest of it. So there is a bit of a uncanny valley there, but
In general, I just don't like the MC face.
that's fair. It's I don't think it's bad, but ooh, spit miner glove. Okay, how do equips work? Ooh, that is a lot of equips. Okay. It's not even a good thing to equip because it reduces my stats so significantly. It's like a good 20% off my defense.
I mean, do you
4%
remember what
magic
happens,
attack,
or
4% critical chance.
do you prefer
Oh,
not to
I'm sure
spoil?
like the I no, so I guess in terms of game design, here's the thought process. So yeah, I know that like the characters become more magic orientated, I think, right? I think that's how that ends up working out. But in terms of game design, in terms of dropping loot and whatnot, um,
Mm.
trying to think. Do you think that's a good idea to give something that you basically can't use at that point as like one of the early drops?
Mm. You may have a point. Uh, it's tricky, right? Because you either reward the player for exploring, if you want the player to explore, and give them something that's currently useful, but it's not going to be useful in the long run because you're going to transform the character into something that cannot use physical attack or whatever. Or make something that's temporarily useful, like a potion or something. Yeah, maybe giving them something that's generally useful, like an accessory.
You you know what would be quite good? So we have accessory, keepsake, and head all empty. Giving something that isn't particularly useful, but would be useful long term, but for one of those slots that you don't already have something for.
Right.
So you'd still equip it because it's like, okay, this is better than not having anything. Maybe it's not ideal at the moment, but it becomes not a choice between something that will clearly be uh so that's interesting. I think you probably don't want that happening on both ways since you give the warning about it progressing the story. So how much of the story do you remember then, now that we've gotten going?
Uh, Group of people go to island. Tower is cursed and transform everyone. Main character and the party goes into like some sort of mind palace for the mage.
Sounds about what I remember too, especially now that I've been playing it more and have been refreshing my memory.
Good
And then
old
they come
cursed
back and
houses.
they're going, yeah, they come back and I remember it sort of ended with like approaching the city and trying to deal with that. And I think I might have ended before the very, very end because it was starting getting to a point where it felt like it was less complete. So I was like, okay, this feels like this is going to change significantly anyways. But there was some time shortly after that where like you took over an entirely different character with like an entirely different group of skills and whatnot.
You transform into a different character, or or you like control a
You
different
took
character.
you controlled a different character. Yeah.
Oh,
It was like looking like current events. You're looking at a different perspective, that sort of thing at the time.
right. Do you like that? Do you like that there are multiple characters, multiple point of views in one game, one story, or do you prefer them to stick to only one point of view?
I think my criticism at the time was a lot more that the like play style felt entirely like it was a different mechanical approach to like how the player played. So it was a bit too much of a hard reset on that element of it.
Mm-hmm. I do remember one game called Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn, where you have multiple like perspectives, and they switch so much that at some point like, well, I'm not. I don't think I'm a fan of this method of storytelling.
It is hard to build up a con so like there's that element of the gameplay design where it's about the setup that you make before you go into battle, because that's sort of like how you break up the tools of what a player has in order to like approach a problem within the battles. You have the stuff that you can set up beforehand and you have the stuff that you can actively do in the battle. That sort of stuff where like actively doing in the battle that's like hit a weakness and you get an extra turn. Outside of battle, that's you equip this stuff so you have this tank healer DPS sort of paradigm, so you have everyone set up for that sort of thing. And it becomes, when you're switching perspectives a lot, it does become hard to sort of settle into like what your strategy as like a group is.
Right. I feel this is Neo as well.
Yeah, I didn't remember that one. I think that's more foreshadowing.
Serrat. Serrat and Seperson.
This is another thing that feels like it's more exposition dumpy than it really needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had like mixed feelings on the idea of like making a dialogue out of the sort of like exposition. I'm trying to remember if I remember that being a good or a bad thing at the time. Or at the very least, mixed feelings.
I feel I have the opposite problem, where I don't know how to expose it.
I try to mix it into the story as much as I can, but there absolutely are times where you just need to be like, okay, this is just some information you need. Here it is. And in terms of like where that was placed, that was also the ideal place to put it. Because generally what I think is like, if you're going to do that, you want to put it at sort of those like bookends, book starts, chapter starts, sort of like scene transitions. So if you like throw that in the middle of a scene where someone's just like, okay, well here's this thing, here's that thing, here's this thing, it works a lot worse than having sort of like, okay, here's a little bit of information, and now let's do our proper scene and pace that properly, because you're basically risking the pacing of the scene otherwise.
We do that in Oathbreaker, right?
Yeah, there's definitely some cases. I'm trying to remember. I think typically when we do like the sort of like map thing, it's immediately after a map or like the very start of the chapter. I think that's typically when I've done it. It's sort of like a setup for the things that's currently going on, or like a reminder of precisely what happened in the last chapter, since you might have went off and done supports or a paralogue or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of establishing the scene a bit more at that point. So many proper nouns. Was Empyrean mentioned before? It might have been. I don't remember, because if it was, I don't remember if ever. I don't think it has been. I'm never wrong.
Is a place near a place where a place is? Somewhere near a place.
Yeah, I'm not gonna remember it. That's probably my biggest criticism at this point, just by how much world building it's trying to lay on in a way that's never going to be retained until it's actually important and you basically say it again.
Have you ever played Final Fantasy 13?
I have not.
I think it's one of the games that pretty much cemented my dislike for proper nouns that can be another thing, more commonly used. Especially because they use 3 different words that are kind of related, but they mean entirely different things. So there's the lesi, the falsi, and the Sith.
I'm not sure I remember all 3 of those at this point.
I mean, right? Like, one of the thing is, they're pretty, like, at the end of me mentioning a list of 3 items, you don't remember them. That's already a problem. But
yeah,
they could have perfectly substituted it with God, Chosen One, and either Fallen One or Zombies.
the important thing about like having stuff like that is it needs to be. It goes back to like the teaching elements of it, right?
I still don't like like it. Like they teach it well enough that by the end of the second, maybe third game, you understand what each one is. Okay, maybe that's a terrible example. Instead of saying, "Oh, we're building artificial god," "Oh, we're building artificial fal'C." Oh, we're screwed because the gods chosen us. Like, oh no, we're screwed because we're lazy.
Did they use it as a more general term as well, like a replacement for the word, like for the word gods in general?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yes, they do. They're not gods.
Oh, okay.
All of them are fal'C.
Sure. So they wouldn't like describe it as, oh, fal'C is like a type of god. They describe it as fal'C just equals god.
Yep. So instead of saying, "Oh, there are gods," "Oh, they're omnipresent,
Okay,
all-powerful beings." That fucked
Okay,
me
I
over.
have to do this. My meritorious and mesmerizing monologue might seem mediocre, monomic, meandering, and mayhaps Machiavellian, yet more munificent, myriad, and magnanimous might I model myself to be. My meritorious and mesmerizing monologue might seem mediocre, mononic, meandering, and mayhaps Machiavellian, yet more munificent, myriad, and magnanimous might I model myself to be. I don't know what half those words mean, even. Hello. Service would that be? So... Person who sells the super rare ball of yarn that I can't afford.
You're gonna afford the coin.
That is a lot of luck, but I also don't really have any Oh, hello. Everyone in the party properly. Assume accessory.
I wonder if
Oh.
we'll ever meet the
Keepsake?
merchant again.
This merchant?
Yeah. Otherwise,
They come back on this ship, so I assume so.
okay. I was gonna say otherwise, kind of feels weird. Like, look at all the things you're not being able to buy because you are poor, peasant.
Oh yeah, there's like a rarity system to the. Okay.
Do you like rarity
Let me
systems
think this.
in non-gacha games, or in gacha games even?
I think you'd want to put the data for the rarity in the description too. There's obviously the color that was being introduced, but at the same time, the colors. So there's something like I forget what game it was, but where the colors sort of like progressed and it went from like or like yellow to orange to red, and you could see that there's like a progression of getting bigger and stronger and that sort of stuff, and there's a logic to it that you definitely understood. And this it was obviously common, basic, uncommon, green, blue, purple, red. A little bit of a logic there.
I think it's
Red's
the
not
MMO
usually
logic.
considered. Is that a color scheme used in MMOs?
Yep.
I can't say I'm familiar with it.
I think specifically WoW. It's green, blue. I don't know what the. I think rare is purple, and then mythic.
And just because I'm being like super focused on criticism and how things can be improved, because that's what I always do. Like this has been, for like a game in this space, this has been very good so far, I think. Everything that I think we've been talking about is very much in the space of Well, this could potentially be done better to refine like what's trying to be done. But what's being done already is being done pretty well, in my opinion.
Right. And it specifically sets a tone for a very long adventure. Like, if you're doing something really short, a shorter intro might be better, but this sets the tone to be, oh, we're here for the long run, kiddo. Strap on.
I can see that.
Like in Magicid specifically, like, okay, you're alone. Congratulations, you are now a magical girl. Like, did I skip a page?
Yeah. While I like Magicite, I wouldn't necessarily say that that was a good like quality like opening in terms of storytelling.
I like it because it sets the tone as well.
Yeah, I'm inclined to give more of a long form storytelling. So maybe I'm biased.
And I'm inclined for the opposite.
I guess okay, so I guess this is probably the way I'd probably better phrase it. In storytelling, you often set up a status quo and then you defy it. Um, I'm not a big fan of when that status quo doesn't have time to settle and be like, okay, this is like you actually get a feel for what the world is and whatnot. Obviously, in Majesty, it was basically, oh, this is just the normal world, and I'm not in a great like what was it job situation in that
Uh,
something like that.
in that one,
So
it
I guess there was
Yeah, go ahead. Doesn't matter.
yeah that one reminds me of like Magical Camp too, where it was just sort of like, oh, this is just a normal thing. Oh wait, suddenly we're in like a magical thing.
Mm-hmm. And Magicid also doesn't have the time to explain about the magical stuff. At least the first one. The second one has a little bit more breathing space and can explain more of the magical stuff. Even though for the first one I was just like, I don't care much about explaining things. You know what a magical girl is. You know what an evil guy is. I don't need to explain Jack.
It is interesting how magical girl stuff tends to be the thing that does that exact concept of, oh, suddenly I stumbled upon this thing.
I've seen a few magical girls. The only one that I have seen enough that plays it straight, so aka old, was Sakura Card Captors, and I think it also is like, oh, I found this thing. Oh, I'm now a magical girl. Cool.
Did it spend time like establishing the regular world? Like you know what I'm talking about, right? Sort of like that story structure, hero's journey sort of concept where you have like, oh, this is the normal world and you establish the current status quo that gets disrupted by the call to adventure.
Right. I think they spent like half an episode establishing who's. I'm gonna assume her name is Sakura. Who Sakura is, who she gets a crush on because shoujo.
Right. So like from like plot structure elements of it, usually I would avoid just like immediately getting into the call to adventure, mainly on the basis of the fact that you're not contrasting it against something.
Mm.
And I'd say the only reason it like somewhat works in like Magicid is the fact that the status quo is very much a, you know exactly what this is. This isn't particularly trying to be like something that you don't already know everything about. Because, well, like, what was the MC situation at the beginning of Magic? Do you remember?
He's a neat. He's a neat, and
Right.
his mom is like, go touch grass.
Okay, so I thought it was like a job situation for some reason.
That's Bimbo Quest. No, wait. That's Merchant Mode. Merchant Mode's job. Bimbo Quest is education. And Magic City's go touch grass.
Right. Okay, there are multiple countries being mentioned in this one.
Hey, at least they mention Empyrean. We know Empyrean, maybe.
Yeah, I did actually. I think partially because I pointed out, I did actually remember.
Ba, 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 ba. Erase. It's funny how the first interaction you get from a viewer is like highlighted, so it makes it really easy to detect spam bots.
Is that like an at or something?
No, I think it's just the first time they talk. Is this is the first time this
Okay.
person talks, and then because they're bots, it's not gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna sneakily sneak in and start talking like a normal person, and then be like, oh, come to our triple X website where you can see this and that. Like, nah, the first thing they're gonna say is like, okay, come to our virus infested website, and then just ban. Oh, I deleted the message. Well, if they comment again, I'll ban them. I should have banned them.
So I guess the one thing I would note, and I think I've probably been able to like phrase this better in like a better explanation way than I used to be able to when I first gave like feedback on this back when it was in that concept form. But in terms of like pacing story, I'll just put this in the frame of reference of just like telling you Ikaru.
Yep.
You know what like a page turner is?
Yes. Well, I call them hooks.
Okay, how would you describe one?
I mean, it's your own pages, but like that last bit on the page that connects one page to another.
Sure, but what makes them a page turner specifically? Like what makes them a good page turner? I guess would probably be the better way to phrase it.
They invoke suspense, a question, thrill, or setup for a joke.
So, so how I sort of see it on like the underlying concept of that, you're sort of left with a situation where what's happening is when I talk about pace, I sort of compare it to speed and acceleration. Because like at the very underlying level of pacing is, I think this applies to basically every medium, is a feeling of momentum. And if you
Right.
think about how you like drive, and if you think about how you like drive in a car, you don't feel speed. You could be going 80 miles per hour, but you won't feel that, right? But you will feel a deceleration from 80 miles per hour to 0 mile per hour. You will feel a lot of that. So what
I
you
mean-
ultimately like want someone experiencing something to feel is the acceleration, the momentum of pacing. Because if you just settle into 80 miles per hour constantly, what you end up doing is you create a situation where it feels the same and the same and the same and the same. And in my opinion, in a lot of like media, that's basically how you create engagement, is to make a situation where you feel like you're feeling that momentum shift. And I think like page turners, because of the nature of the natural break between this page to the next page, is an excellent example of how you can feel you're reading something, and then it gives you a reason to want to go to the next page and to move forward, because it sort of escalates, like that suspense, it escalates in some form, and then it has like the sort of climatic payoff, right? You go up and you go down, that sort of thing, right?
Right.
Does that sort of make sense?
Yep. There's a graph. Let's see if I can put it in.
You're talking about like the engagement curve?
Yes, the one that shows in. I think they
Right.
specifically analyzed the first Star Wars movie, and how like it has up and down. Like just after an up, there's a down.
Yeah.
Like after
acceler-
escaping
like,
the. Go ahead.
And I think you can make this work. You make this work on both like a, um, I think you can make this work on both like a macro and micro scale. So like a singular battle in a JRPG, the gameplay system, it is most engaging if you're feeling that engagement, acceleration, deceleration, acceleration, deceleration. It is least engaging for like a single battle in a JRPG if you feel like you're just doing the same thing the entire time.
Yeah.
You could make it like a really quick battle, but if you're just pressing the same skill 2-3 times in a row, that's not interesting, right?
Cuff, which is what happens when I play Trails by Day like Cuff.
Okay.
But even if in the same battle, you can have this pacing. Like, maybe not with the low-level enemies, because with the low-level enemies, you're just gonna spam the best thing that kills them in one turn. But with a boss that you have to pace yourself, literally, like, you can have highs and lows. Like, for example, in Trails by Daylight, like, the highs would be when you use your boosts.
Trails through Daybreak. Sorry.
Through Daybreak. When you use your boost and everyone's powered up, and then you use your skills, but then you eventually, like, the boost runs down, and the boss not dead. So you have to go into some sort of farm mode, where you have to, like, stall for more boost, heal the damage that has been done, and prepare for the next high.
Right.
Rinse and repeat.
So, like, I actually think it's a problem most JRPGs end up running into, and that's the reason why a lot of people are like, I find turn-based combat boring, because most turn-based systems tend to become way more about, like, what is the optimization of this system, that sort of thing, and then you just sort of do the best thing. A lot of systems are like that, really, for the turn-based games and whatnot, especially. And whenever someone says, like, I think generally if you hear someone say that a game feels grindy, that's basically what it is. A game feels grindy because it feels like it falls into a lull of doing the same thing over and over again, and you don't feel that acceleration. And that is applicable on macro scale for like the entire story or the curves, micro scale just like the individual turn of a battle, or in anywhere in the middle from like a full battle or a dungeon or a chapter or anything like that. I think that's the case throughout all that. Like, I will write, like how I write scenes in games and whatnot takes that into account, where I never, part of the reason like I use narration as I do is a way to not present the information in just like a dialogue way, right? So just as an example in this, where I started to feel like it was sort of like, this is probably a bit much because it's starting to feel a little like it's lingering on this too long. On the ship, went around talked to people, and then when I was talking to Remy, there was 2 conversations, both of which were notable and characterizing and good, but they were also back to back basically.
Mm-hmm.
So they sort of ended up bleeding into each other, and they ended up being, I think, not as engaging because of that. The individual parts are good. It's just more sort of like the pacing of it and how you do that. And I think there's so much, and I don't blame anyone at all for like not like doing this perfectly, because I sure don't. I just sort of understand the necessity of it, and I definitely don't do it perfectly. I just try to keep it in mind as much as possible as a way to try to feel out what works the best for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It is just like getting good at that is just
It's hard.
like that is like expert level writing in my opinion. Getting like really good at that is the thing that separates like a really good writer and just like a decent writer.
Yeah. And
And being able to do that at all levels too, as well as like a game designer too.
Yeah.
Just like crafting any user experience, I think like being able to get a feel for that and understanding how that's going to be, and designing in a way that will naturally create that as you play the game, read the story, whichever else. That is just such an invaluable skill.
that's what I really like about SRPG. Fire like designing for SRPGs, because it's very easy to design where high stake battles are gonna be and where there's gonna be this sort of like tranquil transition between battles. Like there's gonna be a battle here, there's gonna be a battle here, there's gonna be a battle here. And then in between like healing time, pacing yourself, etc.
Naruto Sonic 2 said, I'm currently watching Kamen Rider Geats, and I'm having the urge to watch more. Is Geats a TV show? Is that like one of the Kamen Rider shows?
I think so, yeah.
Or Gears? Okay.
It could be geeks.
I hope you enjoy it. Maybe we just sort of ran past what we were talking about that prompted that. But I'm a little confused as to the relevancy. But I hope you enjoy it.
Have you seen Power Rangers?
Yeah. I'm not. Is this like part of the Magical Girl discussion? Maybe.
Oh,
That
yeah,
would make
maybe.
more sense as to how that was prompted.
The only one I remember really well was the third one with the ninjas. And they were like they know they were gonna become Power Rangers eventually. The first one, I think it was more accidental.
I don't remember the stories of those very well, but I did watch that a bit as a child. Yeah. Like the original Power Rangers, like the first couple seasons or something like that.
Yeah.
I will say this also. One thing I really wish this game had is like a text log.
It's very easy
To be able to like
implement as
go
well.
back and just. There are definitely plugins you can use to make that show up. Yeah.
The one from Magic and Merchant Mode. It's really useful for testing as well, because you can fast forward.
Hey Icarue, I think this might be that moment. I do vaguely remember this.
Look at this image.
Icarue, Do you want me to say yes or no?
Your choice.
I'll probably say no. So I'm gonna assume it doesn't happen, and you can remove the image.
Welcome back. Nothing happened. Literally, nothing happened.
Da da da. Is MC wearing a bra at the moment?
That's what I see. I mean,
Yeah, in the
oh, also in the face as well. Maybe like a shirt
okay.
in in the shape of a chest.
I don't remember. I don't remember this. So this is I know this is in terms of the in terms of the TFTG stuff, this is definitely more on the like actively affirming sides of how it presents it,
Mm,
which I'm not against by any means. It's more an approach to how you treat it because like it was a discussion that came up in my Discord and whatnot, where some games are like really like, yeah, this is like clearly more just like a trans experience sort of game. And like in my case, like when I write, I tend to be um, sort of like in the middle between the sort of like, because I see like, because the nature of like changing from like a supernatural magical thing, I so heavily see the sort of like borderline horror genre elements of that, and I usually sort of play along the lines of it being like an interesting thing that you could be excited about, as well as a wow, okay, your body's fucking changing and you have no control over it. What are you gonna do? Like this is sort of like a horrifying concept in a sense, like if you really sit down and think about it, that sort of thing.
right. For me, is a bit of change is scary, and sudden change is scarier. Like, imagine you one day wake up in, like, no offense, like Japan. No one's gonna take offense if I say you suddenly wake up in a rural village in Japan without speaking Japanese. Like, you don't know how to speak Japanese. You're gonna be, bleh, you're gonna be horrified, even though like you might have wanted to go to Japan, and your first instinct's gonna be, how do I return to my home country, to my city? I think there's an anime about that.
Yeah, that's sort of like the thing is like a writer that I find really interesting about the topic, where just because how people handle change is such a sort of canvas for different stories and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Because it's like a fundamental thing
Because
to write a story, right? Change.
yeah, that's like the inherent nature of a character arc. They change in some form. So what if that change is forced upon them? What if that change is something they don't have the control over? How do they change to match that? For the worse? For the better? Talk about like for Oathbreaker and whatnot when like the original sort of theme that I put out for that's been sort of the core of everything that we've done for it. It was basically turning weaknesses into strengths. And it sort of puts this thing on the table where it becomes a story about someone who's sort of faced to forced to sort of like become the thing they consider a weakness
Right.
for like good or bad reasons, and then proceed to learn how to basically turn that into a strength and learn how to um, learn how to embrace something that they didn't consider viable before, different paths, alternatives, things that they didn't really understand, and that sort of stuff.
Right, right. And that's also my my approach in a way. It's not quite physical, like, oh, this is about this specific issue, but it's like more general.
I also think that tends to make it easier to write a full story with a cast of characters that are also based on that theme, right? When you get sort of like into the weaknesses into strength, or in between, about how the sort of like core theme of between is the idea of everyone's constantly changing. You're a new person every day, and the you of today isn't the you of before, but the you of before is remembered and is echoed into the you of today. That sort of thing. That's sort of like the core of between.
Or refusal to change as well. Like in merchant mode, is more about like, oh hey, this thing might be easier, but you're sticking to this one thing out of pure stubbornness.
Yeah, openness and different way. Because like when you have a want, because that's actually an interest, like how I approach like structuring stories tends to be around the idea of the character has a want, and usually like the plot twist sort of, or like the turn that happens in the second act and whatnot is usually they achieve it, but or they get close to achieving it, and but it's not in the way they really imagine or as consequences they really wanted and whatnot, and usually they grow in a way to basically find what they want, just like in a different form because of the experiences they've had over the course of it. So like that sort of, as you're describing for merchant mode, that sort of like naturally fits into these sorts of stories, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Ooh, typo. But yeah. Not that I have anything against it being more on the nose for that. And I definitely can see things being added to this from what I remember playing before, where it's much more on the nose. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a legitimate story to tell.
Yep.
Um,
Especially if they are themselves trans or wants to like experience what it
yeah.
feels to be one. And then
Yeah.
there's Reiko. Reiko's trans and hates like likes the idea of transformations, but her she as well likes that transformations are cursed. Like the more you're transformed, the harder the game's gonna be.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's much harder to tie into like an actual character arc because you're sort of fighting against it. You're sort of fighting against the nature of change being it's because it sort of frames change as a bad thing, right?
Yep.
When character arcs are about change.
I mean, there's probably a thing because not all changes are good.
Yeah, obviously. But it's more about framing the nature of change, right?
Mm-mm.
Like, I know Reiko's trans, so it's not like she's trying to introduce the idea of being trans being a bad thing or anything like that. She just more likes the idea of, like, framing the consequences in that way. And I think there's value to that, too, because I've written stuff like that as well. It's just a lot trickier to write as a story. So I'll be interested to see where Reiko's game goes in terms of shifting that. Because it very well could be this is a bad thing, because it's chapter one, right? It's not even a complete chapter one. It's chapter one, and very well could be shifting the framing from this is a bad thing to this is a good thing. Though it might be tricky in the long term just because like the mechanics are sort of built around it being a bad thing.
Yeah. Like, mechanically is one thing, thematically might be another. I can see it being like, okay, being trans is hard, and being transformed with so many debuffs, like, is a challenge. Are you gonna take that challenge or take the easy path and just be cis man? Is this related to the journal or?
The journal. Just such an awkward thing to walk into a tent and be like, oh, I'm going to read this person's musings about how they're attracted to these two people.
Hello. Akijo. Akaijo. Akijo. Oh, suddenly more
Hello.
people.
This I thought was like a really cool thing because this was in the concept too, where it was like mini versions on the world map. I thought that worked really well back then too.
Oh, and the map's different.
It might be. This is vaguely similar to what I remember. It might just be better graphics and setup for that.
Is this one of the games you made? Is this one of your games? It's neither of our games. Is from. I have the window.
This is from Atramentia. This is Sword and Soul on TFGS. It is in the sort of TF games RPG Maker genre, one of the newer ones that has been getting more popular lately. I've been following it myself for a while, and I haven't played it since a concept form that came before it was first posted on TFGS. So I want to play it again to see how it's updated. It reminds me a lot of my own approach to making games, so...
It makes you nostalgic.
So many abilities.
And if I remember correctly, they're gonna change in a bit.
Is it in progress? It's not done, if that's what you're asking. This is version 0.4a that is currently the most recent release. Okay, TP does increase with guarding. It does a lot of damage.
Are you at chapter 1? Yes, this is chapter 1.
Yeah, I do have no idea how long it is anymore. Because I played the pre-release concept was the last one that I did, so this sort of chapter that we're in is stuff that I've played before, but without the recent refinements that it's had.
The prologue was about an hour, and then half an hour. We've been playing the chapter 1 for about half an hour. This game looks well made. We'll pass the message along. Do you have contact with...
very much.
The,
Not outside of TFGS. I figured you or I would probably go like post the VOD in the thread for it.
Yep, not a bad idea. I think I did that for the first time I played it. Maybe. I did that for one game. I forgot which one. So how did you get in contact with this person? Did they just DM you or?
Originally?
Yeah.
So they posted a thread on the concept form of TFGS and I basically just played the download leak that they did and gave a bunch of feedback based on that, and they were appreciative of it at the time. I lost a lot of freaking health.
Did you recover it?
To an extent, I did, yeah.
Do you have levels? Like, is it worth grinding up?
Maybe. I didn't pay too close attention to how much. I think, okay, that stun attack is probably the best attack. And all of them have.
You do have.
Yeah,
XP.
that's not much XP per battle though, for how much effort goes into each. And it's always tricky. Oh, I'm not a massive fan of level being sort of the determining factor in games. I like when games have levels, I usually like when they make it really easy to catch up, basically, and be in the range that they expect.
Like, it's tricky because if, like, EXP is a resource, so managing that resource is tricky, especially when you can grind. Like, if you're not able to grind, it makes it so that who you choose, who battles, because who gets what EXP is tricky.
It's a balancing thing, I think, ultimately what it boils down to.
Yeah.
I think most situations can work. It's just really easy to mess up, basically. Like a super precise science of the math.
And like, if you think about it, like, EXP is mainly an excuse to force you to battle low, like, non-boss enemies. Like, essentially, stop running away and fight something.
I say the biggest part of it, and it's something that that sort of became clear to me as I made a game with no levels or like progression systems, is that it's more about the number getting bigger. It's way more about
True.
the feeling of progress because people really do like the feeling of progress.
But you can do something like Magical Camp, where it's more like, oh, you reach this level of relationship, here, have a stat boost. I mean, I remember.
I tend to prefer
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I tend to prefer horizontal progression.
Meaning.
The differentiating idea between horizontal and vertical progression is that vertical progression can be more akin to like leveling, where basically your progression means the tools that you currently have become better, while horizontal progression is more like your tool set expands. You get more tools that you could potentially use, and there's different ways to combine them and that sort of stuff. Like in between, where you have different classes that do different things but they're all supposed to be like similarly powerful.
Right. So, kind of like a card game.
Probably.
where you get more
I think you
cards.
probably
Go ahead.
I think sorry, I was just gonna say, like, you probably within a horizontal system you want to have some minor levels of vertical progression within them. That's probably the ideal system.
Mm-hmm.
But you just want to keep that sort of minimal so you feel progression, but you don't necessarily feel like you need to grind in order to achieve it.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the
Mm-hmm.
best way of doing that is basically making it so that the bosses give the vast majority of the XP that you need, right? And there's like a few enemies, and you design dungeons basically with the idea that you fight um, two or three enemies throughout that dungeon, base, and you can sort of assume that they did, and you just design the dungeon in a way that you sort of forced to fight two or three, and then you sort of balance it around that.
Right.
I also like the idea of XP being like if you're significantly lower level, you get a ton more XP.
Mm. Yeah. I was thinking of
You were saying something.
milestones. Uh, I was probably saying something about the cards, but eh. Uh, I think an idea of milestones might work, where like every boss just ups your level, but nothing else.
What do you mean?
Like
Like what? I guess what else would be?
like low level. Like when I say low level, I mean non-boss enemies. So, for example, if you defeat the boss of the let's say you start the chapter at level 5, but you don't level up until you defeat the first boss, which then levels you up to level 10 or level 6. And you can find things exploring in the dungeon that maybe boost your attack or defense or something like that.
Quick note: I think dilation. I think it said time dilation. I think dilation was spelled wrong. I think. Just FYI, if um, I keep on saying Atramentia, watches ends up watching this. Something else I like to do that I would say this isn't doing, and it isn't required to do by any means.
Huh?
Um, I like to make world lore mysteries about how the world works, sort of like built up like a mystery, where when you introduce it, it's a way to make it feel more substantial and make the player care more about learning it. In between, like what the nature of a will is, right?
Right?
That's something that you don't really learn what it is properly for like what, like 3 4 chapters in that or something like that.
Yep.
And like the whole place they are sort of in question and that sort of stuff. That's also another way to pace it out more so you don't have to put stuff up front as much.
That is very true, yeah. Like if you sprinkle information, tease it. Like on a psychological level, if you manage to manage expectation and manage to pay it off, it can be a really rewarding thing for the player to discover. Oh, this thing's that thing. Oh, Darth Vader's look sounds more a sudden thing.
Sorry, what was the last thing you said?
Like Darth Vader being Luke's father is more of a plot twist rather than a revelation.
Yeah, I'd say those are synonyms actually.
Uh, But like the difference I would like to say is like a plot twist. Like a bad. Well, I wouldn't say a bad plot twist, but like something that doesn't have good foreshadowing versus something that does. Like, oh, it
So you're
was
saying something that sets up an So you're saying a revelation is just something unexplained that gets revealed, and a plot twist is something that sets up a current expectation for what it is, and then pulls the rug under for you with a revelation that it's actually something different.
Kinda. I honestly said the things and then and then regretted it after the explanation. Yay.
Well, I mean, I see a distinction there that's worth making for sure.
One is like, oh, you didn't know this, but I'm actually your dad. And then the other one's more like, oh, we're gonna sprinkle who the actual murderer is. And then when it's revealed that it's the butler's like, oh, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Kind of deal. Hi, Reiko. We talked about you earlier.
Yeah, hello, Reiko.
Oh, someone joined. Who joined?
Right.
Why joined? And
They exited. It's too late.
No, he's still here. Or unless two people joined.
I thought I heard someone exit.
Iliro, if you wanna see what game we're playing... Oh, actually, it doesn't matter. If you wanna chat, you can go to Twitch. I say that's the only benefit, right? Like, we're seeing you
so.
stream, so
Yeah.
they can see the game, and they're hearing us talk.
We would certainly recommend using the Twitch to watch it, basically.
Yes. Oh, they appear on screen as well.
Yeah. It is interesting how extensively, because if I remember the concept of this properly, there was almost none of the main character like having indications that they were trans, basically. It very much felt like in the line of the other side character was trans and the main character was being set up in a way that you could sort of decide for them.
And so with the bra and the current messages, it's more established they are trans as well. Because I do remember the red guy being trans from the time I replayed it.
For Rem? Yeah, for sure. That was like the big hook on that. So it's just interesting seeing that shift. Like I said before, it's not like a good or bad thing. So.
Oh, that's very small text.
Oh, was it hard to? It's on a fairly high res monitor for me, so maybe it was easier for me to read because of that.
I mean, for me, it's because I'm not seeing the window per se, but I'm watching OBS. Oh, nice. I kind of would have wanted that they use that image for the face image. They have expressions, right?
Yeah, they have had expressions and changes in that.
In the scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel?
I wonder if it actually is just straight up that. I didn't look at them too closely to think about that.
I think this area is new, I think.
Yeah, I don't recognize a lot of this. I think it was like literally just more of the sort of like void area from before previously. Technology, they call it. It's marvelous. I think they'd call it technology even if it was like magic based for everything else too.
When do you think the word technology was invented?
Oh, I have no idea.
Because, like, a watermill is technology. A hoe is technology.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it just means the tools that we use, right?
Yeah.
Ways to.
Everything's technology.
Why does that guy look familiar? It reminds me of that guy in the castle a little bit. That was like, ha ha. Was it Carrington? I vaguely remember him from the first time I played too.
I don't remember myself. I didn't pay too much attention to the castle part.
Why would you? Oh, okay, so you can't.
How consensual do you want the kiss to be? None? Got it.
It's funny because my initial impression of him was like, this guy is like sleazy. So it was like, hey, let's not have this kiss. And then it wasn't allowed. And they mentioned, I think they mentioned Tommel at some point too, as like an actual person. Hmm. This is a very different way for this to play out. I'm trying to remember how it played out originally, but it was not this for sure. That said, I don't remember the original one feeling uh super well refined at the time, if I remember correctly.
The
I
kiss
remember it
or
being one of the more. I remember it being one of the less well-paced parts of it. If that'd probably be the way to phrase it. It's also been like half a year, so I'm also probably overstepping in even saying that because that's like a quarter of a memory I'm trying to fill in the blanks for.
quarter of a memory? Oh, I missed the TF moment. Oh, the changing bodies part. I mean, it's kind of ongoing.
Yeah, it's so if you missed the section when everyone changed, basically it was the idea that there's. Oh yeah, I saw something over there. Scrap of paper. Basically, it was a thing where we entered a tower, and we basically entered a memory, and we had to take the forms of people that were actually there at the time. One of them turned into a fairy, one of them turned into a
Doku.
magi, and one of them turned into a dog who cannot talk.
The dog's not happy that he's not able to talk.
Oh, he just walked over to a bush. He's probably going to take a piss. Nope, this is not this is not what we're supposed to be focusing on right now. If I was in this situation, actually, I'd be way more focused on. I'd probably be way more focused on. We're trying to like stop something that's sort of framed like it might be the equivalent to the end of the world or something with the Gate of Alexandria. We need to focus. Come on.
Party pooper.
Come on. We got those stakes. Ooh, I think that's a country name that's been mentioned before.
Pendilor. Oh, this I remember.
Oh, okay. That was a bit of a sudden shift.
You lasted as a warrior, inquisitor, etc. for like half a second for a single map. I don't think you retrained.
Ah, wait, no. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't remember. I don't remember actually. Yeah, if the design is permanent in this. I know like you come out of this with the influence, like it's making a big emphasis on the influence of the memories on your own behavior and whatnot. I know that that sticks around to an extent, if I remember correctly.
Have I heard of Monster Girl Uprising? Uh,
Is that the SRPG one?
There's a SRPG one that's not made by Flanagan.
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 If it's the, yeah, it's the SRPG one. Yeah, that's on. I think that's on Itch at the very least. I think it's on TFGs too.
Yep.
I'm not big on SRPGs, so I probably didn't try it myself. Despite my involvement in writing one, it usually has to grip me. It usually has to grip me in non-SRPG terms, and then I'll be able to do the SRPG stuff after that.
Plays like Oathbreaker. I mean,
like Oathbreaker, as in like, I mean, it's a pretty standard formula for the gameplay system.
Oathbreaker
It's
uses
Fire Emblem, basically.
Oathbreaker uses like pretty vanilla SRPG maker stuff, SRPG studio stuff. Like, I wanted to recreate like a good old Fire Emblem, specifically Path of Radiance. So it's pretty much and SRPG Studio was built to be a Fire Emblem engine. So if it uses the vanilla RPG Maker stuff, or SRPG Studio stuff, with no bangs or whistles, I think that's the saying, then it's pretty much gonna play very similarly, compared to, for example, something that is not very close related. I would say on the first one is Lenigan's other game. Plays a little bit different from. Have they uploaded? Yes. So that Transfiguration games plays a little bit different from the standard SRPG Studio stuff, and then secondly, there's Netotaria NTR Netotaria Tactics Revolution, which plays very differently from a normal like it plays similar enough that you can see the parallels, but it's different enough that you can say it doesn't play the same as Oathbreaker. It's like saying Octopath Traveler plays similar to Pokemon, even though they're both turn-based, party-based RPGs. They're pretty different in how they play out in the moment to moment. Even Octopath 2, Bravely Default, which are made by the same people. I have to say the AI sprites are not bad, unless they're commissioned.
Which part?
The AI portraits in the pause menu.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I saw anything commissioned when I was going through the credits page. I'd have to double check that. But I think it's primarily the creator doing a pretty good job at mixing not commission or non-AI stuff with AI stuff to do that. I think so, at least.
Can RPG sprites be made by AI? I don't know. Maybe. You might have. There might be one. Like, oh hey, can you make me this character in this positions?
For like pixel art, you mean? I don't think I've heard of anything that's like half decent for pixel art because AI plays so heavily in the realm of blurred like you could like part of the reason I think you can tell it's AI when you see it is that the style has such a fuzzy necklace. It has like sort of like there's like fuzzy and unsure edges to stuff to the point that I don't think you could do pixel art particularly well because that has such very explicitly defined stuff. Uncanny Valley a little bit, but it's also just like in general fairly consistent in terms of like how that style works, right? Like I think these are pretty good for AI. They like don't fall into that style if that's what they are. They or at the very least the AI does a decent job at emulating like the coloring style of the stuff that isn't AI. Because I know like the dog and the fairy for sure are non-AI things that they like extended out, or there were full versions that I'm just not aware of.
Mm-hmm.
Oh snap! Okay, I wasn't expecting fights.
But have they explained how the artificer plays out?
No, I
Panic.
actually don't think a tutorial popped up in a similar way as the others.
Panic. Let's see. There's a AI pixel generator. Let's see. Give it some time. Hmm.
A lot of health for a random enemy. I guess I haven't tried running yet to ensure that that's consistent.
A viable strategy.
Strange that the sprite looks like a terrier, but the portrait is a Rottweiler. I assume there's basically a dog sprite they're able to use, and it's probably pretty difficult to get like a specific breed for like the in battle one. And I know, and I'm pretty sure that the dog one is like it's not AI or anything. That's also something that's specifically taken.
How many attacks do you think a normal monster should be able to resist?
Uh, in like just like a normal random encounter monster,
Yeah.
six at 6, 7, 8 in that range at like max.
Yep. I
Especially if you have a team of 4.
Yeah, I would say teams times 2 probably. Team size times 2. Or
What times
1.5.
2? Sorry.
Team size times 2. So if there are 4 people, should be around 6 to 7 attacks. 3 people should be 5
So you're
to
aiming
6.
for like. So you're really aiming for like 2 to 3 turns, is what you're saying.
Correct. Let's go damage punches. I think that's still at the turn.
Well, we're gonna find out real soon if I need to start running from stuff.
Are you low HP? Low health? Low?
No, just time and patience.
Right. My random mob
Are
thing.
you-
Go ahead. Would be 4 hits for the weak, 6 for the bigger, 8 for random threats, and that's without any combat mechanics. It also depends on the enemy party size, right? Like 4 hits times 4 people, that's 16 hits. That's a lot of hits.
I'm a big proponent of. It's probably the best way to phrase it. Bosses being the focus of combat.
Mm. I agree as well. Like if you take like 10 rounds to kill one random enemy, how many rounds do you need the boss to be for you to feel like a tough fight? Like it would have to be like 30, 50 rounds at that point. Like this is taking forever.
The other problem with it is that I'm not seeing any sign like the battle and like the encounter design is made to force you to change up like the state of the battle a lot. If I were to compare like if I were to compare it to like Between, I do a lot of stuff in that where it specifically goes through it designs like a particularly long fight. Like so like one of the bosses in the most recent recent release, the fight is designed around lasting around 20 turns, but like there's so much going on like the enemy side where you have to sort of like adjust what you're doing on each turn, uh, that it changes like that sort of like discussion of like acceleration and whatnot. If it was 20 turns of me basically pressing for like 15 of those turns the same buttons each time, that would be way long. If it's 20
Right.
turns of like you change it each time because you're basically constantly strategizing and adjusting to the encounter that you're presented with, I think that works way better.
Like your bosses have like 2, 3 phases, right?
It's less phases and more like a progression of like a set of mechanics and whatnot.
Right.
So like there's a bunch of like predictable mechanics that you get taught throughout the game. I don't know, you know, like MMOs and stuff.
Yeah, I remember what mechanics you were talking about.
Yeah. There's like a very obvious tell and that sort of stuff, so you sort of understand what it is, and it's because you understand what it is from a balancing perspective. I can sit there and be like, you know what's going to happen. You're allowed to be hit really hard with this if you don't react to it like in a way that's proper. And then what I try to do is I set up those mechanics, and after I set up those mechanics, I give the player a bunch of different tools for the ways they can approach it, so they can approach it in different ways throughout the battle, or just in how they set up their party. So they have tools prepared to sort of deal with these things that they know is coming. And usually they're sort of like category type mechanics that are sort of played out in slightly different ways. Usually there's one that's basically like do damage. There's one that's do tanking. mechanics. There's one that's do healing, or one that's like shift tactics and stuff like that. It's sort of based around the idea like there's different ways to do these things, and in their sort of fall into several categories and et cetera, et cetera. But the ultimate point being like the only way you can really justify a longer fight is if the encounter design, very specifically, is complementary to that, right?
Yeah.
And that's, in my opinion, is where uh, that is typically where I find JRPGs tend to feel very like they fall flat in the encounter design, because a lot of them are hyper focused on the tools that they give you. So the actual fights tend to be way more focused around that than the actual like enemy design or that sort of stuff.
Mm. I feel you like Octopath Traveler, specifically the second one.
Maybe.
It does that where the bosses, like we talk about, like the how
I
the
will
system
also note
works.
that the way
Go ahead.
I will also just note real quickly that the way that I approach it is super duper like on the nose. Like this is how it works. Like I think the way I approach it is about in your face that this is what I'm trying to do, as you could probably get. And I do think a lot of games also try to do it in a lot more subtle way for the encounter designs. Where they try to make it sort of just like not something, because the reason like mine's on the nose is because I want you to be able to predict what's about to happen, right? So you can adjust and I can make the attacks powerful enough that you have to be worried about it, and you know that you actually have to react to it. And I think a lot of JRPGs tend to try to do similar concepts as what I'm saying, but they don't. But they don't necessarily have real consequences to not like reacting properly, that sort of thing, because it would be unreasonable for the player to predict something that they have no way of knowing is coming unless they've played the battle before, that sort of thing.
Right, yeah. I remember one.
Sorry, I finished my thought. You were talking about Octopath Traveler. Sorry.
Just mentioning that we have mentioned you how Octopath works about shields and weaknesses, and most of the bosses shift their weakness halfway through.
Oh snap! Okay, I pressed the button and it just started flying through. Whoops.
Well, a good excuse for
Um,
the not change log, message log.
Yeah, I looked in the main menu and it wasn't there either. Um, let's see how much we miss by having that all skipped. Maybe maybe the scene will basically play out exactly the same in terms of what we take from it. Oh, look, there's summing it up. Perfect. That's probably the best place for me to fuck that up.
Yeah. Also, probably this like after the scene might be a good time to call a stream.
Yeah, I was thinking like where would be a good place, because this is playing out differently. I don't know if there's going to be a climactic moment. That would have been a good place to stop after.
I think it sounds like they're gonna make some sort of plan and how the plan works out. It definitely feels a lot longer than before.
This section of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I see, okay, so, and I could be wrong in my memories. I think my memory of it was basically, it was sort of in that same void area, but instead of being like you're like brought to the area to see the memories in person, you sort of went between different parts of a mini sort of maze of the same sort of style, and then you sort of overheard like summaries of basically what these are talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if these are all identically the same, but I think it was like the similar information in a much more compact and sort of clunky format, where it was just sort of like you go and then you get this exposition and then you go and you get this exposition. It's definitely better for how it's playing out in terms of this.
I mean, I'm not playing it per se, but I feel I would like the other one more because it's like, oh, here's like a bullet point of what's important, and then you can come back to the real world to finish the problem that you were having.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like somewhere in between would be the ideal, where the escalation of, yeah, we're at this place and we're trying to build up to this like climactic, we got to protect this gate thing, was a bit more of the emphasis. And you could sort of sprinkle more of the stuff that it's trying to do here while still doing it exactly as it is, either throughout in smaller sections or before and after, potentially.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because the problem, so I'd say if I were to compare it to Between, in sort of how I approach, because I have similar things where it's like you're sort of experiencing the past through the memories of uh, the person that you're connected to an extent, and it's like influencing you and whatnot. I have that too, but it's primarily through it's primarily through side quests, basically.
Mm.
So the story that you're telling at that time and your experience is of that thing at that point. You're sort of not like inserting it into the middle of another thing that you're also sort of like, well, I sort of want to see what happens with this.
Right, right.
So it sort of makes a messier pacing sort of element to it. It isn't even necessarily a bad thing. It's just sort of which of the two are you currently more invested in? Are you invested in this story back here, which is now at this point at the very least trying to sort of switch itself back to contextualizing the thing that we're working with this gate and all that sort of stuff?
The Assassin's Creed problem. Specifically the third one.
What do you mean?
In Assassin's Creed, there, like, you played as a current version of an assassin and the Asian version of an assassin. And you played the ancient version to, like, quote unquote discover where certain things are, like magical MacGuffins. But the thing is, where would you rather, like, climb in the, especially that you know of those, like the American independence buildings where it's like relatively flat, or you can climb the Eiffel Tower while it's being renovated, and like really tall ass buildings that are like 80 stories tall. Where you'd rather be? And a lot of people, well, I was of the idea of, oh, I actually really want to play an assassin game in modern day like world.
I it's been so long since I played Assassin's Creed. I think 3 was the last one I actually played too. I definitely feel like them never doing a proper just like modern day one was like properly a modern day one where that was the focus was definitely a unfortunate.
Yep. I think I was trying to say something, but then I was like, hey, let me rant about this thing. It turned into a mini rant. I'll keep a buck. I'll keep it a buck. I hate traversal being a game focus because I find it just a boring waste of time. I mean, it depends. Like, it depends what you mean by traversal, right? Like, Mirror's Edge is a parkour game where the main thing is get from point X to point Y, but the traversal is really fun.
By all concepts, it's basically a platformer, right?
Yeah. Oh, right. Like, all platformers are essentially they focus on traversal.
Yeah. Would you describe the traversal as the main gameplay loop of Assassin's Creed, or would you describe the combat as it?
Uh, that's the problem. Like, the early Assassin's Creed didn't have this much of a problem because they managed to balance it okay-ish. Like, for me, I really like climbing buildings in Assassin's Creed 2. Like, climbing up top of a cathedral and look around, like, Florence. It was, like, super cool. But then, like, climbing on top of the Philadelphia Capitol being, like, 3 to 4 stories high, like, it's not the same? No offense to anyone that lives in Philadelphia / Americans. I would say that was the main thing that I liked. Like, the stealthing and climbing. So, in a way, traversal, but it was really streamlined. I don't think combat was the main focus, especially in the early games, because you can just counter and kill. Even
Oh,
you...
I hope I'm not expected to read this because this is long and in a very, very cursive font. Oh, I don't think I was meant to read that given the fact that it didn't linger on it that long. Oh, whoops.
I mean, you, Legend of Zelda, I don't want to play much because it's just a lot of empty traveling.
Oh, I'm surprised that this isn't. Especially if the series isn't traditionally about traveling or traversal and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a good time to call it a stream, then, or? And I liked Assassin's Creed as a
Yeah, that's
collection.
that's probably it. Yeah, it's probably a good point to stop. If there's going to be any escalation, that could probably be saved for next time too.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, I would say I feel as though the game's in a solid place. I'd say that the issues, like, if there's like any issue that I'd sit here and say, hey, this really is not working as well as I think you might think it is, it's the. It feels like a lot of the scenes just sort of, oh, hello, Kuroko. We totally weren't just.
We're not about
Yeah,
to
we
leave or
weren't just
anything.
ending it. Yeah, we weren't in like the last stretch of actually doing this. So I wasn't like just summing up my thoughts so far.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. So in general, I'd say I think the game is a good play. I think the refinements that have been made since the initial one that I did like massively improve it. It feels like it's way closer. Like I think I said it before, where it's like it felt like it was like a first sort of like creation by someone, but you could see the potential there.
Mm.
I feel like it's much closer to meeting that potential. I feel as though there's a few consistent things that I would consider to be problematic in how it's played out, where which largely amount to information like exposition and pacing, where there's a I think the pacing's I don't remember if it's better or not because I'm way too far out to really remember pacing that well. um there are definitely some scenes like that last one where they were talking about it where I accidentally skipped a chunk of it and it still felt like it probably was 1.5 times as long as it probably should have been. um at the very least, the scene wasn't framed in a way to make it justify its length. It sort of just sat in there talking about. They were basically just like explaining why this thing works and why the solution that they had in mind was the thing to do, and they all agreed upon it. And then you had that little thing at the end, which was a bit of a shake-up, and that works pretty well at the end. But before that, it was very similar throughout, basically. And you could have done that. You could just abbreviate that significantly and probably achieve exactly what you want to in a bit more of a way that doesn't feel like that acceleration stuff where it feels like the same speed going throughout it. It didn't. Like most of the pacing stuff, like almost all the time. That's the reason why I LARP on about it. Is that the right word? As much
Yep.
as I do, where the acceleration versus speed thing, where like every time when I come across something that feels like it's sort of like getting along and it feels like it's taking too long to do what it wants to do, it always feels like it's sort of settled into a like sort of like still water versus rippling water. It doesn't feel like I'm moving. I don't feel the momentum and that sort of thing.
Mm-mm.
Um, for example, like obviously it's by scene basis. Some of them are better than the other ones. I definitely feel as though in general, probably scenes are a bit longer than they'd like to be just throughout in general. I don't think that's a massive deal. I think if people like it, that's the sort of thing that they'll um, also be perfectly happy with. I think that's generally the case. And then there's also the exposition dump elements where um, I feel like half the like notable scenes that we had just sort of dumped on a bunch of new exposition each time. New proper nouns, new names. I think we've been introduced to probably, oh, let's see, one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. Show up there, and nothing with like the sort of like, oh, he's on the ship. You have like probably a good like 8 by that point, and by the time you get into like the whole memory stuff, we're being introduced like a good another 10 character. Like it feels like we're 2 hours in, and there's like 20 notable characters that we've been introduced to with names, and that is maybe a bit excessive
Right.
for how many scenes have played out and how much you're expected to. And that's just on the character part. That's not even without like all the lore elements and world building that have been done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um,
I
I
feel.
guess, yeah, I guess,
Go ahead.
I guess I feel like, yeah, it basically dropped that much. Sorry, I guess are we going to say something in relation to that?
Kinda. I was just gonna say I don't think this game's for me. It's a little bit too texty. I like games where it's more of a good cycle between gameplay and story. Like,
Yeah, that's another thing that's probably worth bringing up in terms of the pacing, where it's not just story pacing, it's user experience pacing, which includes gameplay. You want to be able to use your gameplay as a way to mix things up. And even within gameplay, so like even within gameplay when you have like a dungeon and stuff, like basically every JRPG dungeon has like some mini puzzle throughout it. They don't do that because they think that you enjoy puzzles. They do it because it's a simple little thing that changes up uh, the experience of going through a dungeon from fight a bunch of enemies into well, you have this little mini, not that hard brain teaser also going on to try to make it more fresh as you go through it. That's why dungeons and JRPGs tend to have like puzzles and stuff. It's not
mm-hmm.
because they think you like puzzles, right? It's a way to sort of keep things fresh and stop it from just being battle, 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 battle.
Yep.
And you can say the same thing about how you uh, give your story too, where you typically want to use a cut scene or a gameplay section or stuff like that is a way, in the same way, where you can break up a dungeon by giving a short cut scene. You could break up a long stint of story by letting you walk around and do stuff, or go do a little puzzle or something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like I said before, like actually mastering that is just one of the hardest things ever. uh, I'm not gonna blame anyone for like not getting it down in a way that I personally, and obviously the big asterisk on this is that this is all just my opinion on where it lands on that like quality of it, that you're not getting it perfect. Like if I was to give a grade on the pacing stuff, I'd probably give it like a C grade, while like a lot of the other stuff I'd probably give like a B or an A range, because the pacing and the exposition is probably where it falters the most. um, it's very tricky if you end up watching this Detrimentia. So I hope me being more critically focused in how I talk about it isn't a bad thing, because I think a lot of the rest of it is very good so far, and I do want to come back to this if Icar is fine with us doing this another stream whenever we get to it next.
Yeah.
I do want to actually get to the end of the content and whatnot because I have been enjoying it, but uh, I think your presentation has been grade A. I think the presentation has significantly improved. You've refined that a bunch, especially since the first time. A lot of the art stuff, a lot of the music choices and that stuff just is significantly improved in my opinion. The actual gameplay itself, I probably would still. There's so many nuances to making good gameplay. I think it's basically like standard RPG Maker combat with a little bit more refinement to it at this point. So it's not bad. It's above average for what you'd expect out of this sort of game in this realm, basically. But I wouldn't like play it for the gameplay at this point. In terms of world, it seems interesting. There's a lot of stuff built up, albeit with a lot of stuff that really could use more room to breathe in terms of how it's presented, but the actual content seems good by itself. The actual characters, there's like a very clear story, like trans story that you want to tell, and it definitely is leaning to that, and I think doing a pretty good job at it too. So I can see why people are quite enjoying that, just looking at the comments that have been made in the thread and whatnot. So I would say overall, a solid B at the moment. I think it's a significant improvement so far on what I played last time, and I think that it is still has a lot more potential to grow and become better. And I'm not going to blame you for not. It's in a state where I wouldn't even blame you for keeping it mostly the same going forward and just adding more content, because I totally have stuff like that too in my games, where it's probably a solid B for a large part of it. So I totally wouldn't blame you on that either. But yeah, no, I very much look forward to the next time we get to play this, and that's where my thoughts sort of end.
Mm-mm. Sounds good. I don't have much to add except probably not my game. Combat seems a little bit too long, especially for how little there is, and how quickly you change classes. Like, I remember there was like one.
Oh, it didn't change classes.
Uh, you
No one
did
changed classes.
to an Arcanist, didn't you?
No, no, you stayed as soldier, and then they put in a fourth party member that was an Arcanist. I think if I remember the concept version of correctly, that actually did happen in the original version, and they actually did, because there's a fourth party member added for a bit, basically.
Got it.
I don't have the save anymore.
I then was confused with the previous part. Was a good breakfast buy, but I crave more spicy TF. If they're gonna shift so much.
Was a good breakfast vibe. What is a good breakfast vibe?
I guess like the start of the day, a good Saturday morning cartoon vibe. I don't know. Or maybe we're all hungry. I'm hungry.
Yeah, maybe. I think for what it clearly is trying to do, it's a breakfast vibe for the stream.
Oh, I think they're having a breakfast.
So I just cooked breakfast. Gotcha. Okay. Well, I hope we make your breakfast a little bit more tasty. Well, with that in mind, yeah, I think it definitely. You can see what it's going out to achieve, and I think it's doing a pretty good job at achieving that, and it's doing it better than it did before. Yeah, and obviously, as Icarus was saying, it also is a lot more focused on what it wants to be, I think, than the version I played before. In terms of like the sort of TF story that it wants to tell. It's not spicy. It's not spicy at all. It's very much based on just like the experience of changing and trying to experience that and stuff. It's way more focused on the reactions, which, yeah, that's good too.
Yep. I wonder how much they can do.
I just want to add to
Go ahead.
that. Like I just wanna add to like the spicy stuff. Don't get distracted by it. Don't feel like mandated to add spicy stuff. Speaking from experience here, like if it fits, it fits. If you wanna do something, do it. But if you have a good base on focusing more on as Six said, the responses to it and less on the spiciness, that's good. It means you found kind of your style and you should keep at it. Like don't feel obligated to make it more spicy because I can tell you from experience it can drag you down. So yeah.
I can 100% agree with that. Uh, you got to make what inspires you to make it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If that's what inspires you to make it, then there is going to be an audience for it. I think I've said this a lot of times to people that are interested in making games. Like, make what you want to make because there's always going to be an audience for that. Maybe it's not the biggest audience, but and it really takes luck to grasp like a big audience for anything in the first place. But you're not the only person that's gonna like something, so always follow what inspires you to make stuff. I think that's the important thing, and then within that realm of what you want to make, then refine it to try to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
Don't
Mm-hmm.
feel like you got to make something specific.
Except if you focus on making boobs smaller. If you do, I'll chase you to the ends of the earth.
Oh, technically, MC in this game went to a girl and then came back, so technically his boobs got bigger and then smaller.
That means I guess I have to experience it for myself later and give my thoughts as well.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's yeah, we'll probably get back to this on another stream, assuming your crew doesn't want to do something else next time,
Yep.
or
Yep.
has like a strong desire to do that. So hopefully that continues too.
Yep. And with that, I think we can
Quote
call it a stream.
total. Just was in the comment. Totally didn't get paid to mail smut for a lie for people with money myself.
To make smut
To make
for life for people.
didn't totally get paid to make smut for like 4 people with money myself. Oh right. Because Avian, because you post some of the stuff that you make, and I think you've mentioned making commissions, and you've posted some spicy stuff in that frame. You're talking about that? Oh yeah, you did correct it to make in the next comment. I'm an idiot. Ah.
Eh. You okay?
Whoops. Oh yeah. I just sort of leaned back and went ah.
Yeah. Well, I need to call it a stream,
That sounded
otherwise
like it.
gastric acids are gonna eat my stomach instead. I'm hungry.
Well, I'm perfectly okay with that too. I don't have anything to announce at this point. Thank you all
Me neither.
thank you all who watch. If anyone makes use out of all the things that we talked about, I hope that it's useful.
Bye bye.
Drive safely, everyone.